I guess this is where I start owning it. If you saw me now, clean shirt, decent job, people nodding at me in meetings, you'd probably think I did everything right. That I studied hard, climbed the ladder, earned my place. Truth is, the entire thing rests on a single piece of paper that shouldn't exist. A fake diploma. I didn't wake up one day and decide to become a criminal. It was slower than that. Messier. I dropped out of university halfway through my second year, ran out of money, motivation, excuses, you name it. Everyone else kept moving forward, and I just stalled. For a while, I bounced between dead-end jobs, telling people I was taking a break, or figuring things out. But the world doesn't wait for you to figure things out. Eventually, the pressure got to me. Family asking questions. Friends posting promotions. That quiet panic creeping in every time someone asked, "So what do you do now?" And that's when the idea first crossed my mind, not as a plan, just a thought I couldn't shake. What if I just said I finished? At first, it felt harmless. Just a line on a resume. But that line needed proof. And proof, well, proof can be created. I told myself it wasn't really hurting anyone. That I could do the job. That a piece of paper didn't define my abilities. All the classic lies people like me lean on when we're about to cross a line we know exists. I didn't think of it as a crime back then. I thought of it as leveling the playing field. That's the thing about lies, they don't feel like lies when you're building them. They feel like survival. I spent weeks arguing with myself before I did anything real. Not out loud, just those constant loops in my head while I was lying in bed or pretending to listen during shifts at work. One version of me kept saying, "This is stupid. You'll get caught. It's fraud." The other one? Much louder. Much more convincing. That voice said things like, "Companies lie all the time. They exaggerate, cut corners, underpay. Why can't you?" And honestly, that argument stuck. I started noticing how many job listings required degrees for things I was already doing. Same tasks. Same responsibilities. Just a different title, and a much bigger paycheck. It felt less like cheating and more like correcting an unfair system. That's how I justified it. I told myself I wasn't inventing skills I didn't have. I wasn't applying to be a surgeon or an engineer. I just needed that one credential to get past the filters, the automated systems, the HR gatekeepers who never even look at you otherwise. Still, there was a line. And I knew exactly when I crossed it. The moment I stopped thinking, "What if?" and started searching how. Once I crossed that mental line, everything got methodical. I didn't rush into it. If anything, I slowed down. Started treating the whole thing like a project. I figured if I was going to lie, it had to be airtight. No obvious cracks, nothing that could unravel with one phone call or a quick Google search. First step was choosing the truth I wanted to fake. I went back to the university I actually attended, picked the exact program I had dropped out of, and built the story from there. Same timeline, same major, just with a clean ending instead of an awkward exit. It felt safer that way. Less to memorize, fewer chances to slip up. Then I started researching what a real diploma looked like. Fonts, seals, signatures. You'd be surprised how much of that stuff is online if you dig long enough. Forums, archived images, even people casually sharing scans without thinking twice. That's when it stopped feeling abstract. I wasn't just thinking about it anymore. I was building something. And the more detailed it became, the less it felt like a lie, and the more it felt like a plan I couldn't back out of. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't about just printing something convincing, it was about removing doubt. Every tiny detail had to hold up under casual scrutiny. Not perfection, just enough authenticity that no one would think to question it twice. I made a checklist. Paper quality, embossing, signatures, formatting, even the way the text was spaced. I found high-resolution scans of real diplomas and compared them side by side like I was studying for an exam I'd never taken. Irony, right? I ordered specialty paper online, thick, slightly textured, the kind that feels official the second you touch it. Then came the seal. That part stressed me out more than anything. A flat print wouldn't cut it, so I dug around until I found a vendor that could create a custom embossing stamp. It felt insane clicking purchase on that. Like I was committing the crime in slow motion. But at the same time, there was this strange sense of control. Like I was finally steering my life somewhere, even if it was in the wrong direction. And once the materials started arriving, there was no pretending anymore. This was happening. When everything finally arrived, I didn't use it right away. I just stared at it for a while. The paper, the stamp, the template open on my laptop. It all felt too real, like I'd skipped ahead in a story I wasn't ready to finish. So I did a test run. No names, no dates, just layout. I printed a blank version to see how it looked, how it felt. The moment I held it, something shifted. It didn't look fake. It looked official. Convincing enough that, if I didn't know better, I wouldn't question it. That scared me more than anything so far. Because it meant this could actually work. I adjusted small details, spacing between lines, the alignment of the signatures, even the tone of the ink. It became obsessive. I wanted it perfect, not because it had to be, but because I needed to believe in it myself. That was the real turning point. The moment I stopped thinking like someone committing a crime, and started thinking like someone protecting a secret. And secrets, once they feel real, are hard to let go of. The night I finally put my name on it, I remember my hands being weirdly steady. I thought I'd be shaking or second-guessing everything, but instead it felt quiet. Like I'd already made the decision days ago, and this was just the final step. I typed it in carefully. Full legal name. Degree title. Graduation date that matched the timeline I'd been rehearsing in my head. Every detail had to line up with the version of me I was about to present to the world. Then I hit print. The sound of the printer was louder than usual, or maybe I just noticed it more. Each second felt stretched out. When the page finally slid out, I didn't grab it right away. I just watched it sit there, like it might expose me on its own. But it didn't. It just looked legitimate. I pressed the seal into it, slow and deliberate. That small indentation made all the difference. It gave the paper weight, not physically, but psychologically. That's when it hit me. This wasn't preparation anymore. I had already committed the crime. The diploma alone wasn't enough. That's something I realized almost immediately. A single lie, no matter how convincing, needs a whole ecosystem to survive. Context. Consistency. Backup. So I started building the rest of the story. I updated my resume first, clean, confident, nothing over the top. I added the degree like it had always been there, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then I moved on to my online profiles. Same dates, same wording, no contradictions. I even scrolled back through old posts, making sure there was nothing that hinted at me dropping out. It felt like rewriting my own history. The strangest part? The more I repeated it, the more natural it became. I practiced answers in my head, how I'd talk about classes, professors, projects. I didn't invent anything new, I just reshaped real memories so they ended differently. That was my safety net. If I stuck close enough to the truth, I figured I wouldn't trip over my own lies. But there was still one thing left. The moment where someone would actually believe me. And that meant applying. Applying was the part I'd been building toward, but actually doing it felt different. Planning is controlled, you decide the pace, the details, the narrative. But the moment I started sending out applications, I lost that control. I remember hovering over the submit button the first time for way too long. It wasn't just a resume anymore. It was the resume, the one carrying the lie. One click, and it would exist somewhere outside my room, outside my control. I clicked it anyway. Nothing happened, of course. No alarms, no instant consequences. Just a confirmation email and a weird sense of anticlimax. Like I expected the world to react, and it just didn't care. So I sent another. And another. Within a week, I had applications out to more places than I'd ever tried before. Positions I wouldn't have even considered a month ago. Jobs that suddenly felt accessible. That was the dangerous part. For the first time in a long while, things felt possible again. And I started to forget that those possibilities were built on something fragile. Something that could crack the moment someone looked too closely. The first reply came faster than I expected. 2 days after I started sending applications, I got an email inviting me to interview. I must have read it 10 times just to make sure it was real. They didn't question anything. No mention of verifying my degree, no hesitation, just a straightforward, "We'd like to meet you." That should have felt like a win, but instead it made my stomach drop. Because now it wasn't hypothetical anymore. Someone believed the version of me I had created. And they wanted to see him in person. I spent the next few days preparing like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. I rehearsed answers, reviewed basic concepts, even looked up professors from the university in case their names came up. I wasn't just preparing for a job interview. I was preparing to be someone else. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I'd have to do. Look someone in the eye, and lie without hesitation. Walking into that building felt like stepping onto a stage I hadn't earned the right to stand on. Everything looked too polished: glass walls, quiet hallways, people who seemed like they actually belonged there. I kept thinking someone would stop me at the desk and say there'd been a mistake. But no one did. The interview itself started normally. Handshakes, small talk, the usual questions. At first, I stuck to safe ground, skills I genuinely had, experiences that were technically true. I could feel my confidence building, which was dangerous in its own way. Then came the question. "Can you tell us about your time at university?" It hit harder than I expected. Not because I didn't have an answer, I'd rehearsed it 100 times, but because this was the moment everything hinged on. And I delivered it. Smooth. Casual. Even added small details, projects, late nights studying, things that sounded authentic because they almost were. They nodded along, no suspicion, no follow-up that I couldn't handle. That was the moment I realized something unsettling. Not only did they believe me, I was getting good at this. The call came the next afternoon. I saw the number, recognized it instantly, and just let it ring for a second longer than normal. Like if I didn't answer, none of it would become real. But I answered. They offered me the job. Simple as that. No dramatic build-up, no. "We'll get back to you." Just a calm voice explaining the role, the salary, the start date. I remember pacing while they talked, trying to sound composed while my head was spinning. I said yes. Of course I did. After I hung up, there was this rush, pure adrenaline, mixed with something close to disbelief. I'd done it. I had crossed the line completely, and instead of falling apart, everything was working. That should have been the moment I felt victorious. Instead, there was this quiet weight settling in. Because getting the job wasn't the end of the lie, it was the beginning of maintaining it. Every day from that point on, I'd have to keep the story straight, keep the details aligned, keep the version of me I'd created alive. And there was one detail they mentioned before the call ended. "Bring your documents on your first day." I barely remember the commute that morning. It felt like everything was happening underwater, muted, distant, like my brain was trying to protect me from what I was about to do. The folder sat in my bag the whole time. Inside it, the diploma. I must have checked it 10 times before leaving the apartment, running my fingers over the embossed seal like I needed to confirm it was still there, still convincing. By then, it didn't even look fake to me anymore. It just looked inevitable. At the office, everything moved fast. Introductions, paperwork, smiles I didn't feel like I deserved. Then HR called me over to finalize things. "Just your documents," she said casually. That was it. No suspicion. No tension in her voice. I handed them over. For a split second, I thought she might pause. Look closer. Notice something off. But she didn't. She scanned it, nodded, and placed it neatly into a file like it belonged there. And just like that, the biggest risk I'd taken passed without resistance. That should have been relief. Instead, it felt like the ground beneath me had quietly disappeared. For a while, everything ran smoothly. Too smoothly. I settled into the role, learned the systems, kept my head down. No one questioned me. No one even hinted at doubt. On the outside, it looked like I'd made it. But inside, something kept shifting. It started small. Casual conversations in the office kitchen, people reminiscing about their university days, shared professors, mutual experiences. I'd nod along, laugh at the right moments, throw in vague comments when needed. Nothing specific enough to trap me, but just enough to belong. Still, every one of those conversations felt like walking on thin ice. Then one day, a colleague mentioned they had studied at the same university. Same faculty. My stomach dropped instantly. He was friendly about it, started asking questions, not aggressively, just curious. What year did you graduate? I answered. What was your thesis about? I hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough for me to notice. He didn't push further, but something in his expression changed. Maybe I imagined it. Or maybe that was the first real crack in everything I'd built. After that conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Maybe he didn't notice anything. Maybe it was all in my head. But once that doubt crept in, it spread fast. I started overcorrecting. I avoided him when I could. Kept conversations short, polite, distant. At the same time, I went back into prep mode, reviewing details I should have locked down months ago. I even drafted a believable thesis topic, just in case it came up again. And of course it did. A few days later, we ended up alone during lunch. He brought it up casually, like it meant nothing. Hey, you never told me, what was your thesis about? There it was again. Same question. This time, I answered without hesitation. Delivered the topic, added just enough detail to make it sound real. He nodded, didn't challenge it. But then he said something that stuck with me. Funny. I don't remember that supervisor taking students that year. He smiled when he said it. Light, almost joking. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a warning that I never got officially exposed. That's the part people expect to be dramatic. HR meetings, investigations, everything collapsing at once. But it didn't happen like that. No one pulled me aside, no one accused me outright. That colleague? He never brought it up again. But something changed after that. Maybe it was in my head, or maybe not, but I started noticing distance. Subtle things. Fewer conversations, fewer invitations to lunch, a different tone in meetings. Nothing I could point to as proof, just enough to make me feel like I didn't belong there anymore. And that feeling doesn't go away. I kept the job. I kept the lie alive. On paper, I succeeded. But internally? It's exhausting. Every achievement feels borrowed. Every compliment comes with this quiet voice saying, "You didn't earn this." You start questioning yourself in ways you never did before, not your abilities, but your right to have them recognized. So yeah, I got away with it. But if you're thinking about doing something like this, don't. Because the worst part isn't getting caught. It's living like you already have.